Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening. Welcome to Effectiveness Week. We are so happy to have you here today. Effectiveness Week is a series of webinars, and it's a week-long series of workshops and online events designed to help you shift from a more marketing activity to more meaningful results. There are 3 days. We're on day 2 now. We have a long list of guest speakers who are going to be here to answer your questions. And we want to make sure that we are addressing a lot of very interesting and fascinating topics. So one of the first things we want to make sure that we cover today is that as we talk about this session, across the week, we're going to be joined by experts from Marketo and Engagio, such as our guest today, John Miller, as well as other speakers from Magic Numbers, Funnel Fuel, and of course, some of our own thought leaders from the marketing practice. We're going to unpack how concentrating on key strategic goals rather than chasing quantity has helped leading brands achieve more impactful and sustainable outcomes. We'll explore how strategic, thoughtful media planning across the entire customer journey is creating a unified brand experience that keeps customers engaged. And we'll examine how focusing on high-impact activities and integrating efforts across all touchpoints can help B2B marketers build lasting brand loyalty. At TNP, we are all about how to make marketing mean more. And there's 3 key pillars for that. The first is set appropriate targets. That means focusing on meaningful business outcomes, incremental revenue, profitability, market share, and pipeline. We're saying don't get distracted by meaningless metrics. Understand how marketing works. If you don't understand how marketing works, then you'll struggle to achieve the outcomes you're looking for. That's why understanding concepts like mental availability and share of voice are important. And finally, measure, prove, and improve. Effectiveness is in part about measuring, proving, and improving the value that marketers deliver. That's not just about showing what's happened so far. It's about showing why you will make certain investments in the future and what you expect to see in return. So, welcome to today's Fireside Chat. I'm Tracy Henshaw, VP of Strategy at the Marketing Practice, and I'm joined by John Miller, founder of Marketo and Engagio. Welcome, John.
Thank you. How's it going?
Very well, aside from a little blip at the beginning, but we're all good.
We got it now. We got it.
So, John, today we're going to talk about how focusing on leads and metrics has helped marketers get noticed. But now there's some big challenges that are coming in place and really addressing how the agency model works, how we ask our clients to measure, and what we recommend. There are economic issues, really stiff competition, much smaller audiences, making it harder for us to rely on old tactics. Marketers now have to compete not just with each other, but also with AI. So, John, can we spend a little bit of time and talk about why you're saying MQLs in the Crossfire and what you mean by the shift from leads to lasting impact?
Yeah. So I think, it starts with my time at Marketo, where, for better or worse, I think I have some of the credit and blame for kind of the current, standard go-to-market playbook, which, to oversimplify is, you create leads with content and thought leadership and best practices. You then nurture them until they're ready, and you hand them like a baton over to sales, a la the MQL, at some kind of magic moment that they then somehow get qualified and then passed to a salesperson who then closes it, who then passes it again to a customer success team or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, at the time, it was all meant to be super highly measurable and quantifiable. And, back in 2008, when I was building Marketo, it worked pretty well. But fast forward to 2024, 2023, I think probably everyone on the call is feeling the effect of it not working so well. Whether that's struggling pipeline numbers, reps not making quota, or more strategic things like high CMO turnover. So something's wrong, right? Something's not right with the kind of the playbook that I helped to create, and we need something kind of different.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of fundamental reasons that we don't have time to unpack all of them here. First off, I don't want to ignore there is the economy,
right?
are too many solutions chasing too few buyers, and that's, that's beyond the scope of what the individual marketer, can do. But within the scope of marketing, I think there's a couple things to kind of unpack. The first one, is unfortunately, as marketers, when there's a tactic that works, our first thought is, well, let's do more of it. And if something
Very
works
true.
for them, well, then it better work for me. And so it's a tragedy of the commons where we just kept doing more and more and more of those same tactics to the point where the buyers kind of got fed up and overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
Started tuning it out, tossing it out, becoming indifferent, to our tactics. And that in turn led to a vicious cycle where they worked kind of less and less. The other main factor at play here, I think, is even more fundamental, which is that very nature of focusing on making marketing so measurable and quantifiable, I think led to what I call a gumball mentality, gumball machine mentality of marketing, where we taught CFOs and boards to think of marketing as like a vending machine where I can put my quarter in and get a lead out. And if I need 10 leads, well, that's 10 quarters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the way buying works. And it's caused companies to do things for the short term that actually hurt us in the long run. Perhaps most importantly, it's caused us to focus less on the fundamentals. Things like brand awareness, things like product market fit and positioning, and perhaps most fundamentally, things like doing right by the customer. And you put all that together, and I think we start to see some recipe for why MQLs aren't working,
I love
and what that path forward needs to look like.
Yeah, I love your analogy of the gumball machine, and I agree. I think that that is something that's evolved over time. I'm curious though, when you talk about, we kind of trained our clients to expect that that was how it worked. What do we need to focus on now that you have all of these different things that are also playing a part in that equation, like the economic issues, like the smaller audiences, as our clients transition from a single decision maker to a buying committee? Where do MQLs play in that space, and how do we need to transform there?
I think there's a lot of sub pieces, behind that. So I think if just a couple of kind of high level things. I think first, probably I would start with saying we got to recognize that most of our target market is not quote unquote in market to buy our solutions at any given point in time. There's this thing spinning out there called the 95-5 rule, which says that only 5% of the target audience is in market at any given time. While I think something like that is roughly true, I take objection to the word rule, because it's not a rule. It's just sort of a back of the envelope estimate of kind of what it might be, and your industry might be different. But the takeaway remains true, which is most of the audience is not in market. So when we treat the buyers not as relationships to be built and people, but we treat them as MQLs to be created, what we're doing is we're trying to say everybody is in market, and we're sort of, banging them as if they're in market. It's like asking for a proposal on the first date. So so the first thing we need to do is recognize, okay, 95% of the people who I want to talk to, are not in market, don't want to take a meeting with my sales rep anytime soon. They don't even necessarily know that they have a problem I can solve. They might not even be aware that my business exists and can solve problems for them. And if they do, they may not think about me or feel about me the way I want them to. Right. So step one is, forget the MQLs and focus first on how are you going to actually build relationships, build awareness with the 95% of the market, kind of that's not in market. That's got some profound implications for metrics that we'll probably talk about. But just recognizing, I think it kind of starts there. Then we get to, okay, there is 5% of the market that's in market,
Mm-hmm.
and we certainly want to find ways to talk to and engage them. One of the big problems with MQLs is that they are not a good signal for who is actually in market.
Okay.
Imagine you have a person who shows up at your website and downloads 10 white papers. That's going to light up any MQL system under the sun.
Right.
Right. But the reality is, you don't actually know, is there a buying cycle happening at that company? Right. They could be just being researched. They could be preparing for a job interview. There's a whole bunch of things that could go on behind that. They might not be a decision maker.
Right.
Right. But now imagine another scenario where 10 people from the same company show up and they all anonymously read a bunch of blog posts and go to the product pages. All right.
Mm-hmm.
None of that will show up as an MQL. Right.
Right.
And yet, I think intuitively, it's way more likely something's happening at that company. And that
Mm-hmm.
was the point of AB account-based marketing and the whole rise of what I would call a marketing qualified account or an MQA, which is sometimes the signals of who's in market really require us to look across a single lead and to look at a broader group.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at intent signals that may or may not be so obvious. Things happening on our website, not on our website, and aggregating at the company level. So that's sort of the state of the art, I think, for the last 10 years is like, well, hey, let's at least think about these things as accounts, not just as individual leads.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps. But in many ways, while leads are too narrow, accounts are too broad. Because there can be a whole bunch of people at a company that aren't part of your buying group. More subtly, if you sell more than one product,
Mm-hmm.
you can easily have multiple buying groups for different products at the same company. So it's kind of a Goldilocks scenario. Leads are too small, accounts are too big, perhaps buying groups are just right.
Mm-hmm.
And what we really need to start to do is understand, is this buying group, this set of 6 to 20 people, or you name your favorite stat about the size of the buying group, is this set of people, are they in market? And then how can I effectively engage with them? And it's a different mindset, but one that ultimately I think is compelling enough that lots of companies do seem to be adopting it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you brought up a really interesting point when you talked about the fact that when you're looking at the account, it's too broad, the individual is too narrow, and it
Yep.
is about building relationships. So as you make the pivot from MQLs and think about it more from the relationship perspective, what are some things that marketers need to keep in mind to make that kind of pivot?
Well, let's go back, I think, first to some of the core principles that I've sort of talked about,
Mm-hmm.
which is things like brand, things like, awareness. As we sort of, break this gumball machine mentality of marketing, right? Where I think marketers start then, moving naturally is to things like, am I creating awareness with my target audience?
Mm-hmm.
And am I creating preference with my target audience? When I talk to CMOs and other marketing leaders, the question I like to ask is, what is the 1, 2, or max 3 words or feelings that your target audience should think or feel, about you?
Mm-hmm.
When we think about the best brands in the world, we all know those answers, right? When you think of BMW, you think of performance. When you think of Volvo, you think of safety, and so on. Right. But if you go and think about average B2B company, the company can't even tell you what those should be, let alone the marketplace. Right.
Very
But
true.
imagine if you could really get your entire target market to think and feel about you the way that you are actually positioned most effectively. Right. If you could do that, when they hit their, oh, I actually have a need and I'm in market mode, the right ones are going to actually probably reach out to you. And I'm not saying it's like that perfect and magic, and there's still a bunch of like operational things you should do to sort of make that as easy and effective as possible. Right. But you know, like we've spent the last 15 years ignoring brand and ignoring feelings, you know, things like that. And the reality is, I think that's what actually we need to be focusing a hell of a lot more time and attention to.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, the best demand gen team in the world will still deliver average to mediocre results if they're at a company with a poor brand or poor product market fit.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly, you know, an average demand gen team or process in the world is going to knock it out of the park if there's an amazing brand and amazing product market fit.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's probably you know the biggest thing I have in terms of thinking about you know how people should evolve in this new world is you know is frankly we have to shift the pendulum a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And that does require moving away from the short-termism. It requires moving away from quantity-based thinking to quality-based thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and so on.
When you are, you know, when you're having conversations with business leaders and you talk about quality over quantity, and, you know, tech, B2B companies primarily are very cyclical in how they approach business. They go, you know, it's very product centric, it's very solution centric, and back and forth and back and forth. Sales driven, marketing driven, back and forth and back and forth. As you're looking at, you know, trying to really move beyond this prior way of thinking,
Yeah.
you know, you talked about the foundation, brand, share of voice. How do you educate a client who is looking at it and saying, well, I really need a way to understand and build this relationship.
Yeah.
But you know, I don't know what to do here to do that other than use the metrics that I've used previously.
Yeah, I don't want to understate that this is hard, first off. You know, there are, you know, CMOs out there who work for companies that are owned by private equity. And, you know, they are told you will report the number of MQLs, you know, in this format every month.
Right.
You know, and then there's other, you know, there's less strict versions of that kind of all the way across the board. So first off, I think the thinking in B2B needs to evolve. That's not going to happen overnight. It's part of the reason I do talks like this, right? Is can I do my part to just help change the thinking of the industry? You know, and I've been banging this drum for about 18 months, and maybe it's starting to kind of trickle out there. And maybe in 10 years, you know, those private equity firms will kind of have evolved their templates kind of for what they need. So my point is it's hard and it's going to take some time to change now, but okay, what do you do today? Right. If you're a marketer, the best thinking I have on that is first, it's going to require a slightly different set of skills from the marketers.
Okay.
You know, I think for the last 15 years, in many ways, the most quantitative, analytical, operational marketers were the ones that sort of were best able to thrive in the old playbook. Now, you probably think I'm going to say, oh, now it's going to be the creative marketers, but that's not what I'm going to say. I think it's going to be the marketers who can best collaborate and communicate with their peers and executives about the changing nature of marketing and go to market that are going to be the most successful. Right. So as a CMO, can you go to the CEO and the CFO and the board, you know, and have a conversation about, look, buying is changing. Like, look at this, look at what's happening with our buyers, you know, you know, if you can bring data about like, you know, what your buyers are saying, that's great. But even if you can't, CEOs and CFOs, they're buyers themselves of other products. So they can empathize, you know, with what it means. So talk about how buying is changing. And then Socratically say, you know, what if you can get them to nod their head, like, okay, yeah, buying is different. So how should we measure this? Mrs. CFO, like, what do you think are the right metrics, to
Mm-hmm.
do? And again, Socratically, collaboratively, come up with, hey, this is maybe what things should look like. And I wish I had examples of companies and CMOs really knocking that out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody's listening and they know one, reach out to me because I'd love to hear more. But I know it's got to be happening some out there,
Right.
but again, I don't, I think this is essential, but it's not easy.
Yeah, agree. Very much agree. So one of the things that you mentioned is, the buying has changed. Technical B2B buying has changed. You have moved far beyond a single decision maker, a single, hand to sway. You're moving into buying journeys and buying committees. You need to know a lot more about your customers now than you did in the past. In the
Yep.
past, you could make the assumption, I can send you an email, I can give you my value proposition, I can share my brand values, et cetera, with you. But now, because there is so much competition, you have to know so much more about your buyers. And that's one of the reasons that you're seeing more and more agencies embrace AI. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing as, what impact are you seeing in these conversations around the buying model and what we measure when AI is introduced?
Yeah. So there's this thing called, I'm going to pronounce it wrong, but Imara's law,
Hmm.
which says effectively that we tend to overestimate a new technology in the short term and underestimate its impact in the long term. You know,
Hmm.
Arguably, electricity would be a good example of that. Um, so I think today, in 2023, 2024, when it comes to AI, where we are is that companies are, definitely embracing it and using it to create content, and really using generative AI,
Hmm.
uh, to even start trying to create personalized content, and that kind of thing. Which all that sounds great and interesting, but I think actually there's a risk that as we use AI to create content that's quote unquote personalized,
Hmm.
that we'll actually risk creating content that actually feels artificial and manufactured. It's almost a personalization paradox, and I think we're actually definitely seeing that today with
Hmm.
these automated SDR tools. Where human, we can still tell if we are talking to an AI. Uh,
Yes.
and so I think sure, okay, so we're all embracing Gen AI, but I think using it for kind of this content creation and personalization, I don't think we're there yet. I think also, just as a quick sidebar, copyright law still says that you can't copyright AI generated content. So I think if you're an agency using AI to create content, you got to watch out for that. And at the same time, that's the short term, right? I
Hmm.
think it's overhyped, and I think this kind of using AI to create content and personalized content is overhyped. But I think in the long term, we have not talked enough about the impact of what some people call synth AI, right? So
Hmm.
there's Gen AI, but then synth AI is how AI is going to synthesize stuff that's out there for us. We're already starting to see that in Google search summaries,
Hmm.
where you search for something and you don't even click through the website anymore, right? The answer is just synthesized for you. That's going to
Hmm.
have an impact on websites and how websites work, and our website traffic. Um, and we're just starting to see in the earliest days in our email clients, right? The new Apple iOS, right, will summarize our emails for us,
Hmm.
right? And if you're an email marketer, what's going to happen to your open rates and your click rates in a world where AI is summarizing your customers' emails?
Hmm.
So we're really, I think, yes, AI is going to be transformative, but it's not going to be the Gen AI stuff that we're using today, right? I think it's going to look pretty different.
Do you think that it's because there's a lot of fear in marketing around AI? You mentioned AI created content and the fact that you can still, we can read it and know that it was not written by a human being. So looking for that balance, how do you find that balance for an agency? And particularly when you're having senior level conversations, when you're trying to shift your audiences from how they measure the work, how they know what is having an impact and what is not. If I'm using Gen AI and it's creating content that I'm telling you is very personal, but you're not opening, to your point, I don't have to open the email to get a summary of it. I
Yep.
don't have to listen to the phone call. I can listen to a voicemail and, delete it in 2 seconds in. Where do you start to see inroads when AI is just one of the competitive factors? Where do you start to see inroads that you can actually measure?
Um, well, I guess I first think that, there are important places where AI is going to create efficiency for marketers, even beyond content creation.
Hmm.
Um, less in the sort of creative side of the agency, but like, my world, I come from marketing automation and marketing technology. There are a lot of agencies out there who make their business running Marketo for their clients.
Hmm.
And the client creates a campaign brief that kind of describes what they want. And it's a Google Doc and people comment on it. And then finally, okay, the campaign brief is approved. And then it gets handed to an agency who then go builds it in Marketo.
Right.
Right. That's not very value added, to be honest. Right. If what if the marketing automation tool could just ingest the brief
Hmm.
and go build the campaign? Like it should know, like, okay, it's a webinar, and this is the content. Well, these are probably the right people to invite to that webinar, and then go build that list, and
Hmm.
make sure it's privacy and opt-in compliant. Like that's an interesting use case for AI. It's
Yes.
technically Gen AI because it's generating a campaign. It's just not generating content per se,
Right.
but that's going to create marketing efficiency.
Hmm.
Now, we all know CFOs care about effectiveness even more than they care about efficiency. You know, so again, I think, personalizing the email that you get versus I get, yeah, all right, that's sort of interesting. What's more interesting to me is how do we actually start to personalize the actual interaction and offer that you get versus I get?
Hmm.
Because we're both at different places in our journey. We've shown different interests along the way. We've shown different propensity to respond to different kind of things, right? The problem with marketing technology today is that it's all rules based. So it's
Hmm.
if this, then that. If this is true, send this email. If this is true, send this email. And when you end up with more than a couple permutations, you end up with spaghetti that is beyond the ability for anybody to really manage.
Right.
But with AI, we can actually, I think, start to really deliver on that holy grail of one-to-one journeys,
Hmm.
where the system is sending the right offer at the right time to each person to achieve some business goal that you care about, right? Ultimately, that should make marketing more effective,
Hmm.
you know? So anyway, I think that's some of the things where I'm interested in seeing where where AI is going to go. That's more fundamental than the let's create some content.
Okay. I'm going to go to a question in the chat. And the anonymous attendee said, if AI is building all B2B campaigns, doesn't that create efficiency, but effectiveness will tank? How do we combat that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I started to address that with the second part of my answer. I think again the AI is sort of just taking in the creation side is just streamlining things like, all right, I got to build a list, right? So you can do that. Where I think the effectiveness really kicks in is creating one-to-one journeys for each person.
Hmm.
Another thing that AI is really good at, it's a form of synth AI, but almost every marketer I know at some point in their career has created what I call a deal story, which is, sales closed the deal. But now
Right.
let me go show you all the things that happened to that deal along the journey. And here's all the marketing touches that we did before you even spoke to them. And
Hmm.
it's a little bit of saying, hey, look at marketing, but it's also a great way to communicate with sales about like, hey, how we're actually collaborating together. So, you're smiling. You probably know every marketer has created a deal story at some point in their life, I bet.
Hmm.
That's a great use of synth AI, right? Just point it at the CRM and the marketing systems and all the touch points and say, go create the story of this deal for me.
Hmm.
Like what happened and where did it happen? Um, and then another great use of synth AI is, okay, look across all my deal stories, and find what are the patterns? What are the golden paths, right? What are the things that seem to actually move the needle for different segments
Hmm.
along their deal story? Now imagine if you could actually train a marketing model to know those golden paths and understand it.
Hmm.
It's going to be in a great position to be able to say, okay, I have Tracy, and we haven't spoken to Tracy in about 2 weeks. What's the thing that's going to sort of help move her and her account to the next stage most effectively?
Hmm.
Right? Like that's a cool use of AI that I think will deliver effectiveness.
I agree. That is a great use of AI and takes the focus off of creative. I love that. I have another question for you. I'm not sure demand gen is shifting to be more data focused, at least in my role. It's been the center point. If anything, it's arming me with more research quicker than in the past. So one of the things we have, the quote that's currently on the screen is AI is redefining traditional demand gen. It's shifting focus from broad tactics to more sophisticated data-driven strategies. Are you seeing that with or without AI, that demand gen in and of itself is looking for ways to be more targeted and more focused on data to understand those patterns that you were talking about in terms of AI and the deal story? Are you seeing other ways that that's coming to life?
Um, yeah, to a degree. I think let's see. We talked a little bit about the kind of 95-5 rule.
Hmm.
Uh, I think the best tools out there for identifying the five, in market are machine learning tools.
Hmm.
Um, because when you're processing billions of signals around what people are looking at to sort of, find the needles in the haystack, that's machine learning, which obviously is a form of AI. Um, I think I mean, so yes, but um, we're here in 2024. I think we're still at a place where the marketing technology stacks that we have are holding us a little bit back.
Okay.
Um, because look across every single major marketing automation platform. Marketo, HubSpot, Pardot, Eloqua. There's almost no AI features built into these things.
Right.
At best, they've released subject line recommender, right? Which is a pretty poor form of content generation. But like, sure, read that email, suggest a subject line. Okay, thanks. Right. But the kind of things that we're talking about, right, which is creating dynamic segments, predicting kind of the right offer at the right time, like that's not in the technology today.
Hmm.
So yeah, I can spin off these great stories of things AI can do, but without tech, most marketers won't be able to actually do it.
Okay.
Right? You can't just go to GPT or chat GPT and like type in these things and have it kind of you know come up with stuff. It does require some new technology.
Okay. So, what should we be talking to CEOs and CFOs to how do we help them understand how the MQA model has changed, why it's broken, and what the relevance is for the metrics that we would promote and recommend to them moving forward? What do we need to be telling them or educating them on?
um yeah, so beyond the sort of new buying model, new metrics, all that kind of stuff, because I think that's a big part of the conversation.
Yes.
um I think to answer that question, I want to kind of answer something else first to kind of, to come back, which I think is a good way to kind of think about the value of the humans and the marketers in the
Hmm.
context of the AI,
Okay.
which I think will then provide an answer to your question. So I talked already a little bit about, wouldn't it be cool if the AI were sort of dynamically picking the right offer at the right time for each person? If you unpack that question, the first thing you have to figure out is what is quote unquote the right, offer, right? You have to tell the AI some function or metric that you're optimizing for,
Hmm.
right? So, you ask marketers what do they want. Most of them are going to say, okay, for my, people who aren't yet my customers, maximize qualified meetings or maximize pipeline opportunities or something like that.
Hmm.
All right. So great. Okay. Now the AI knows to try to go optimize that thing. And you give it a bunch of offers, out there. There's this ebook and there's this blog post and there's an upcoming webinar and there's this video and you have a dinner next week. And
Hmm.
let the AI choose all the right things for everybody. Okay. So far, so good. Here's what gets funny. It's time to contact Tracy. And, maybe I should send Tracy my recent analyst report,
Hmm.
or maybe I should invite her to the dinner next week. The AI knows that analyst report's a really good report.
Hmm.
There's a lot of deals that have closed. I've downloaded that analyst report, right? But you talk to a marketer and say, what should happen here? And almost every marketer is going to say, invite Tracy to the dinner. That's
Right.
next week, right? Intuitively, we know something, right? Partly we know that the dinner's next week, and also we're spending a lot of money on the dinner. We better make sure it's full, and and also that the Gartner report, the analyst report, is still going to be there next week, but the dinner won't be.
Right.
So there's all this extra information in our human heads that it's going to be very difficult for any AI to actually know, you know,
Hmm.
and it's kind of subtle, when you sort of, start to figure this out. But I think it's really, really important as we sort of think about how humans and AI will work together to sort of kind of achieve these goals,
Hmm.
and whatnot. So to answer your question, okay, what do CFOs and CEOs need to know, right? They need to know this, that the answer isn't it's just all AI,
Hmm.
right? That it's really the human AI combination that's going to create the most effectiveness. Um, and that's going to require different, and then ultimately, okay, and now that's going to require different skills, different metrics and all that kind of stuff down the road.
Right. Okay. So we have another question in the chat. We're in planning season for full year 25. Is there anything you would encourage forward-looking marketers to do differently as they get ready for the next year?
Well, I mean, I've already talked a lot about how I think, the our focus as marketers needs, the pendulum needs to shift, that we're a little probably overinvested in measurable demand gen and underinvested in brand and awareness and things like that. Now,
Hmm.
I don't want to say, oh, that's just purely a budget thing, right? It's not I mean, sure, as a rule of thumb, picking a number out of the air, maybe it should be 60% demand and 40% brand,
Hmm.
which is probably different from what most people are doing as they plan for the year. But again, I don't want to imply this is just a money thing, right? It's really, do you know the three or four, two to three words and feelings that people should have when they think about you, right? Do you really agree on that across your company? And then, okay, how are we going to inject that into our target market, and start to kind of, move the hearts and minds? I would be planning for how I'm going to do that. And now ultimately, yeah, that will require some budget implications to actually kind of, activate those campaigns. But that's almost secondary to the just saying, hey, I'm going to really focus on that. So that's probably, that's the biggest thing I would encourage people to think about.
Okay. All right, great. So another question, in terms of working beyond the marketing qualified lead too small and marketing qualified account too big paradox you cite, how much of the solution do you think is technology based and how much do you think is process and culture based?
Yes. I think it is. I mean, they both clearly matter.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of like, process and culture, I think first off, just moving away from leads, to thinking about kind of some level of groups, like that's a mindset shift, right?
Mhm.
There are different processes, that kind of support that. Even including like how you route stuff,
Mhm.
um, to kind of different people. It has some implications for time frame windows. Like, do we measure, are we measuring the impact of what we do today? Are we recognizing that the impact of what we do today is going to actually matter 3 quarters from now, right?
Mhm.
Not this quarter. And how do those kind of tie together? So there's definitely, I think, a lot of process and technology stuff. But yes, also technology will matter. Uh,
Mhm.
Something holding buying groups back today is the fact that no major marketing system today supports them. Apparently, the new Adobe Journey Optimizer B2B has some buying group functionality.
Mhm.
Wild Company Demandbase is working on buying group functionality. But like it's not in Marketo, it's not in a HubSpot, it's not in Eloqua, it's not in Pardot, sort of the major systems.
Mhm.
So to really kind of embrace that new world, it's what companies are doing today is they're just trying to hack the opportunity object in the CRM, which is okay, not great. There, I think to really have buying groups take off, it's going to require some new technology also that supports it. So that's why I'm saying yes, it's both.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. So we have about 2 minutes left. I want to just open it up to you. If you had to say three things that you would want this audience to walk away and remember, what would
Yep.
be the three things that you think take this away from this session?
Okay. Well, number one, don't treat marketing like a gumball machine. Recognize that, when we sort of are, just banging on, quarter in, lead out, quarter in, lead out, and hitting people over and over with the same tactics, we're not building relationships, we're burning them.
Hmm.
And that we need to focus on long-term, and some of the more fundamentals in the business. Number two is, we're just recognizing that that's going to require changes in how people think about marketing, how people measure marketing, and as we sort of were just talking about, and also the marketing technology,
Hmm.
and the tools and systems that are available. So, this is not a overnight journey. This is a, multi-year journey. And then three, going back to Amro's law, is, all the hype today around Gen AI and content creation, I think is a bit of a misleading path.
Hmm.
And, where I think AI is going to really transform things is around synth AI, and some of the kind of the new capabilities that will start to emerge to deliver more efficiency and effectiveness.
All right. John, thank you so much. Wonderful conversation. Appreciate your openness, your candor, and your humor. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for MQLs in the Crossfire, the shift from leads to lasting impact. Have a great day.
Thank you.